Welcome to Constitution Study TV. This is Douglas V. Gibbs, douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. And the question posed to me was Susan B. Anthony the first woman to vote legally as a woman? And I also saw an ad right before the midterm election that said Susan B. Anthony was the first woman to vote legally, and I believe the person's question probably comes from that ad. You know, it's funny because I remember 2-3 months ago there was a guest on a program on Fox News Channel, and the host had said something about the Constitution, and the guest said, well, let's not put too much faith in the Constitution. After all, at one point, the Constitution said that blacks and women could not vote. Well, that's not true. What it does is in Article 1, Section 4, is it leaves the manners and procedures of the elections up to the states. And at the time, the states indicated that only property owners could vote, and at the time, only men could own property. Now, that said, that does not mean that there were no black voters. There were free black men who owned property in some of the northern states that did, in fact, vote. The Constitution never said anything about sex or race when it came to the vote. However, because jurisdictions were disallowing those persons to vote, it became necessary in the future with the 15th Amendment and the 19th Amendment to make it a nationwide referendum, I guess you could say, by amending the Constitution, requiring that blacks be allowed to vote and that women be allowed to vote. Now, the interesting thing is, in those original 13 states, while women couldn't vote or tended not to, as the frontier moved westward, because, you know, women worked side by side by the men, and so what would happen is they received the same kind of respect, I guess, as the men did. And so in the frontier out west, women in some jurisdictions, and mostly local elections, not necessarily federal, were given the right to vote. In fact, there were some cases where women would even hold office. There would be female mayors of cities and so on and so forth. Even Time magazine admits that after the Civil War, that also women were voting prior to the 19th Amendment, which was not ratified until the Wilson presidency. So here's what it says in Time magazine. So we're really talking about those recent immigrants who came from the eastern U.S. and from across the globe, particularly in the 19th century. In the years after the Civil War, those women found plenty of opportunities in the West that were not available in the East. Everything from the right to vote to equal pay for women teachers to more liberal divorce laws. Wyoming Territory passed a series of such laws in 1869. So women's suffrage in Wyoming, the allowance to vote had been passed in Wyoming in 1869, according to Time magazine. Partly in an effort to attract more white settlement, which of course was also intended to unsettle indigenous people. The West was the first home of women's suffrage in the U.S., with nearly every western state or territory enfranchising women long before women won the right to vote in eastern states. I don't know who the first woman who legally voted was, to be honest with you. It may have been Susan B. Anthony, may not have been. By the way, that article I was just reading from Time magazine, the title of the article is Women and the Myth of the American West, and it was published January 11th, 2015. So, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this is, see, we have this idea that if the federal government doesn't do something, it doesn't happen. Therefore, if the 19th Amendment, no woman must have been able to vote before that. That's what a lot of people believe. Well, Time magazine even admits women were voting before that. And we can go back to the founding fathers. Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams. John Adams really respected his wife's opinion, and so he talked to her often. She was very influential in his decisions as president of the United States even. Martha Washington, the wife of George Washington, very influential. We could talk about the daughter of Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr actually pushed for legislation for women to vote, and his daughters were his inspiration. He made sure they got proper education so that they could live independently if they so decided to do so. So women's rights, the women's right to vote, whatever you want to call it, definitely something considered very early on. Now, one other thing I want to add to that is I do not believe that voting is a right. I believe it is a privilege. I know that it uses the word right 4 times in the Constitution, with the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, the 24th Amendment, and the 26th Amendment. But when you go back to the founders, they considered it a part of the privileges and immunities of citizens, which is indicated in Article 4, Section 2. In other words, voting is a privilege of citizenship. Now, notice what I said. I didn't say it was a privilege of gender or a privilege of race. It's a privilege of citizenship. We have the right to pursue happiness, and we have the right to pursue being able to vote. And in the United States, if you're a citizen, regardless if you're a woman or a person of color or whoever you are, if you're a citizen, then you have the right to pursue that opportunity to vote. But it is a privilege of citizenship, not a right. Thank you for listening, and we will be back with another video soon. And always remember that sometimes when you hear something about the Constitution, it's not always accurate. Going back to that guy saying, well, gosh, the Constitution said that women and blacks couldn't vote prior. Well, that's, once again, not true. So, got any questions, shoot me an email, constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com. And I may answer your question right here on the video page here at YouTube. Remember also, visit my blog, politicalpistachio.com, and if you would like to donate, there is a donate button on that page, douglasvgibbs.com or at politicalpistachio.com. Until next time,